Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the National Bleav Network. We're celebrating our 12th anniversary in September. Can't be more excited about that. And speaking of excitement, today, Sunday, July 27th, it's the day Astros fans have been waiting for years. The day Billy Wagner finally enters Cooperstown. To mark the occasion, we're going to go back and we're going to listen to my interviews with Astros broadcasters Bill Brown and Greg Lucas, who covered Wagner's career in Houston from the early years. So we're going to get some fantastic stories from the vets, from those guys in just a bit. Now, if you missed it the first time, you're going to love this show. But even if you heard it, I've got a couple of bonus clips before we get there. So stick with me for a second. It's not often an Astro gets in the Hall of Fame. Mostly we think of guys like Nolan Ryan, Jeff Bagwell, and Craig Biggio, but people forget about another pitcher, not a reliever like Wagner, but a guy who had a short stint in Houston. And he was just here a couple of years, back in the early 80s. I'm talking about the great Don Sutton. And when we lost him 4 years ago, I asked Greg Lucas about his memories of Sutton, both as a player and broadcaster. Don Sutton pitched for the Astros in 1981 and 82. He had a 24-17 record with the Astros. His ERA was under 3. It was past his prime at that point. Every year from 72 to 76, though, he was top 5 in the Cy Young voting for 5 straight years. But he pitched 7 seasons after he left the Astros. So even though he wasn't in his prime, he continued to pitch well into his early 40s. Greg, he was just one of those guys that beyond that little short span in the early 70s, he just would go out there and give you a good solid 7, 8, or 9 innings every game. He was very consistent, and he was somebody that you wanted to have on your team because he was an innings eater in a time where you could eat 8 or 9 innings in a game if you were a starter.
There was an argument I saw online when he got named, when he died, about his Hall of Fame qualifications. And I don't know who some of these guys are that are saying, not a Hall of Famer. Well, obviously he's a Hall of Famer. Is he in the starting rotation if you have to put together a starting rotation of 5 Hall of Famers? No. He's not one of the top 5 greatest pitchers of all time, but he is certainly a Hall of Famer. You win 324 games as consistent as he was, and I don't care if he wasn't the ace of the staff every year, that it might have been Koufax or it might have been Drysdale or it might have been somebody else. He was a superb pitcher, and I'm one of these guys that is big time on longevity. I think longevity makes a big difference in a Hall of Famer, and certainly he had longevity in addition to having a doggone good arm.
His win-loss record, 324 and 256. Earned run average in his career, 326. 3,574 strikeouts. So across the board, all the numbers that you want, 300 wins, low 3 ERA, 3,574 strikeouts. And to do that over the course of that many years, like you said, with the Dodgers and the Astros, the Brewers, the Athletics, the Angels, and then he came back to the Dodgers at the end. But, super long career, just the 4 All-Star appearances. Like I said, that brief run that he had that was just extraordinary. Led the league in ERA actually one time, and that was the year before he was with the Astros. But, just a fantastic ball player. And Greg, what kind of a broadcaster? Was he a good broadcaster? Did you like him as a broadcaster? Because he did that for a long time.
Yeah, I did it. He was with the Braves for quite a while. In fact, still when they were a super station. So he was, you could hear him for a few of those years before that the super station disappeared. No, he was a good broadcaster. He knew what he's talking about. He could talk about pitching, obviously, but he knew a little bit about what the hitters were trying to do, and he did a nice job all the years that he was involved. Of course, for a long time, his son was a broadcaster in the major leagues too, and I was impressed with him, and he's a good guy. I didn't know him well, but I knew him well enough when he was a broadcaster anyway to say hi to him or maybe be eating near him in the press dining room. I think he had a great all-around baseball career, starting as a pitcher and then concluding really during his years behind the microphone.
Always a fountain of knowledge from Greg Lucas. And if you look for that whole conversation in our Houston Sports History playlist, you'll hear a long tribute to Hank Aaron, who passed away the same week as Sutton in 2021. All right, moving to Billy Wagner. One of the cool connections between Wagner in the Dynasty Astros is Brent Strom, believe it or not. What did Strom have to do with Wagner? Listen to this clip from the Pitching Ninja podcast with Rob Friedman from a couple of years ago.
He's one of the all-time great pitching coaches. I mean, he knows more about mechanics than probably anybody, and I don't think gets enough credit for what he's done for pitchers in the modern game. What was the big thing that he helped you with or taught you, or what did you take from him?
Rick Peterson and Brent Strom are huge with me learning how to replicate my mechanics, and that was closed-eye drills, starting to feel instead of see. And once I could feel it, then I could do it. I actually was in instructional league when I first met Brent Strom, and he took me out to the six-pack, and he goes, "Hey, I'm going to do this drill where you close your eyes and throw to." Holy God, I don't think it was everywhere. I don't even think I got near the catcher. It was all, and I was frustrated, so I couldn't make adjustments, so it was useless. I remember in 2006 when I went to the Mets. Rick Peterson was there, and he was telling me stories about Hudson and Moeller and Zito and the competitions they'd have with their eyes. And so I started to buy in a little bit more. And so my bullpens would be with my eyes closed and learning to feel what I was doing. And so now my adjustments became so much quicker. Brandon showed me that, but I wasn't ready for that. You know, you can see probably through my strike percentages, and it probably started a little bit in Philadelphia, but once I got to New York, the walks to strikeouts became very noticeable. That, you know, out 3-1, but it did take some time. But Brent was huge with setting that path. And then, you know, when I talk to Brent now, we talk about and laugh because it was just terrible. But I'd never been. I was so raw to the game that I couldn't make that adjustment. All my high school pitchers throw with their eyes closed. I make them have to do this because the feel has to be there, as well as understanding the mechanics to get there.
Go watch that full interview with Wagner on the Pitching Ninja podcast. Friedman gets into real depth on Wagner's delivery, as you can imagine if you followed the Pitching Ninja on X over the years. Just really fun stuff from him. How do you feel about Wagner finally getting into Cooperstown, guys? Tell me about it in the YouTube comments. What's your favorite Wagner memory? Did anybody actually meet Wagner while he was here? I'd love to get some stories. So just throw something in the comments for me. It always helps out the show. As always, support us and get updates on every show we drop by subscribing on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. Hit us up with a quick thumbs up and tell your friends about us. Spread the word. All right, guys, let's hear from Bill Brown, Greg Lucas, and I'm going to close with a little of Wagner's induction into the Astros Hall of Fame back in 2020. Enjoy the day, Billy Wagner, and congratulations to the greatest Astros closer of all time. Joining me to pay tribute to Astros legend Billy Wagner, who is a new inductee to the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. We've got a member of the Astros Hall of Fame, 30-year Astros TV voice, and a man who called most of Wagner's 225 Astros saves. It's Brownie himself, Bill Brown. And Brownie, how cool is it to say Hall of Famer Billy Wagner?
At last, Robert. We've been waiting for a few years for this. Of course, he's been qualified all along since the very first vote when he only got something like 10% of the vote. But it's a big breath of relief because it is, as you know, and people out there know, the final year he was on the writer's ballot. So there would be a waiting period until he gets on a veterans committee, had it not happened today, but it's a big sigh of relief that it has happened.
Now, didn't you tell me there would be several inches of snow on the ground in Houston before these voters wised up and finally put him in?
I might have. You and I have talked about this so many times about the voters, so I don't want to harpoon them again because they did finally get it right. And they do have a way of, I was reading some of the articles today, I'm sure you were too, Robert, about a couple of voters saying, I don't want to be the guy who prevents him from making it in on his final year of eligibility. So I think that's a big factor.
Billy spent 8+ years in an Astros uniform. He was called up at age 23. Take me back, Brownie, to when Billy got called up. What do you remember about first seeing Billy the Kid, Billy the actual kid?
Right. This is such a great, somebody should make a movie about this guy's life. It would be an incredible movie. It would be PG, of course. But no, First round draft choice, Ferrum, Division III college, Virginia, Division III. I think he is the first guy to be a Hall of Fame inductee in Cooperstown who came from a Division III college. So that is something in itself. And we were, of course, watching the results very carefully as he progressed through the minor leagues with the Astros and expecting him to arrive fairly quickly on the scene, but kept hearing reports, he has a great fastball, but he doesn't have a third pitch. He doesn't have a changeup. And they had hoped he would be a starting pitcher, but the third pitch never really developed. And they had a need in the bullpen. So therefore, when he arrived, that was what he was. He was a late inning reliever. And we weren't sure, you're never sure how somebody's going to respond to the major leagues because it's the very highest level. But he responded extremely well, took over that closer's role, and became one of the best of all time. And he is such a nice guy, and I'm really happy for him.
One of the things that, I was listening to on MLB Network is they were making the case that this is the most dominating pitcher of the live ball era when you look at the statistics. For sure, you could argue that maybe he's the most dominating reliever when you look at the numbers. He's definitely a top 3 reliever when you look at the numbers. And Brownie, I don't think we can say this enough. This guy is 5 foot, maybe 10, 5'9", 100 nothing pounds. He was dominating in the PED era, the heart of the PED era. This is never factored in, when they discussed him over the last decade of Wagner getting in the Hall of Fame. Look at what he was, how small he was, who he was facing, what he was facing as far as balls flying out of the ballparks left and right. This is unreal what he's done.
And because of the strikeouts, he didn't allow all that many batted balls. He had the highest strikeout rate of anybody, lowest batting average rate of anybody who was a reliever. So he was doing these historic things. Why did it take the voters 9 years to recognize this? You and I don't know. A lot of people don't know, but we're moving on from that. And what I see is a story of a young man who was moved from family member to family member when he was growing up. He had aunts and uncles taking care of him in Virginia. He was riding the bus over the mountains to go to school every day. He was drawing a strike zone on the side of a barn on whatever family he was living with at the time on their property to throw the ball against the side of a barn. He broke his arm. He was right-handed. He broke his arm and it became a left-hander. You can't make this up. This is Hollywood stuff, but it's real life, and I'm just so happy for him.
Yeah, we're going to hit on some of that stuff. I have Greg Lucas coming up, so stay tuned for more about his background. And you hit a lot of those key stuff that we talked about. But what are your favorite memories of Wagner in an Astros uniform? Are there any particular games or moments that stick out in your mind?
Well, I think as he grew into the role of closer, it seemed to be a question of confidence, as it is with anybody who's moving to the major leagues for the first time. We knew he threw hard. We didn't know how wild he would be. But once he locked in on his control and got his confidence going, he was just a dominant player. He never lost his humility throughout all of his success, never lost it. So as a person, that's what I remember. I remember sitting by him on the airplane and talking, and he didn't want to talk about the game. He didn't want to talk about stats, but he would talk about baseball. He loved baseball. He just had a real passion for talking about anything to do with baseball and his family. And that's what it was all about with Billy. And even when he moved along to the Atlanta Braves, I ran into him one time in a shopping mall in the afternoon. We had a game that night and we chatted for 15, 20 minutes. He said, I have to go to a meeting. And we would just kind of get lost in basic conversation, nothing special, nothing political, nothing of any great importance to it, but just the kind of guy you wanted to spend time with.
Was there anybody that was as much of a straight shooter in an Astros uniform than Billy? I mean, Baggy would be honest, but he would keep a little bit close to the vest, I would think. Caminetti was a straight shooter, but Billy was kind of open. That's, I think, the charm of him and why the fans loved him so much.
I agree with that, Robert. That's a very good observation. And maybe because of his upbringing, maybe because he came from a very, very modest upbringing. Never really had much in terms of possessions, but he had that blazing fastball and he had the work ethic and he just wanted it very, very badly. But off the field, you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know it at all.
How much would you have liked to seen him get the same opportunities in the last few years in the postseason that the Astros have had? Do you think this would be like a even more kind of Mariano Rivera type story for Billy Wagner's career if he had got the chances that some of the guys that this group has been a part of?
It could have worked out that way. I would have loved to have seen it. Yes, you're right. People move on in baseball. We're used to it. And it worked out for him and it worked out for the Astros as well. But nonetheless, it would have been great to see him be a Biggio and a Bagwell and spend his whole career here. That is just not even anything that's realistic to hope for anymore in today's game.
Yeah. And I want to ask you about somebody that we lost in baseball last week in just a second. But before we roll on, I just want to remind our listeners about Underdog Fantasy. Underdog offers a unique approach to fantasy sports with their simple pick'em style format. You can select players you believe will outperform expectations without the complexities of traditional daily fantasy. And if you feel like drafting, which many fantasy owners feel is the best part of this, Underdog offers some simple drafts where you can select a squad and compete for serious cash. You'll find all the major leagues and college sports on Underdog, plus a user-friendly interface that makes it easy and fun to play. You can jump in the fun by clicking the link and using the promo code HOU. Look for them in the YouTube and podcast description of this show. And if you do that, you get a free pick and up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Not a bad deal. So go check out Underdog Fantasy and make sure to download their cool app as well. All right, Brownie, before I let you go, I also want to ask you about Mr. Baseball, since we just lost Bob Uecker last week. Did you have much interaction with Uecker over the years?
We had him on the air 2 or 3 times on TV. And of course, we were rolling on the floor every time we had him on. He just had that gift of humor. See him in the media dining room before the game or going to his booth before the game. Always very personable, very congenial. Just one of the best guys and the funniest guys you would ever want to be around in baseball.
And you have any last words, I guess, on Billy and what he was about?
Well, I think he was about everything the fans would enjoy. Family. Yes, he wanted to perform well, but he was the same guy after a blown save as after a save. He definitely wanted to succeed, wanted to be great, and he was. But I think, he would have been extremely disappointed not to have made this a vote tonight. Now, would it have been something that would have been an absolute game changer for his life? No, but he mentioned it today in an article. It was about the people who grew up around him, who wanted this so badly. It was about the people of his area of Virginia, because he didn't think they'd ever had a Hall of Famer from that part of the state before. And the Division III background, we talked about that earlier. He didn't think that had ever been done before. So apparently some writer who's a voter must have told him that, must have researched it and told him that. But he wanted to do these things to help other people know that, yes, you can break down these barriers. You can do this. Don't count yourself out. And that's what Billy was about.
Is there any question he's going to give one of the better speeches in Hall of Fame history?
I think it'll be worth listening to, no doubt about it. Billy is a, speak from the heart kind of guy. So it's going to be really interesting to see what he comes up with.
Absolutely. And speaking of, we talked about Uecker. For anybody who missed it a few days ago, I posted a longer tribute to Uecker with the former Houston sports reporter who spent the last 15 years covering the Brewers and calling their games for Telemundo. I'll put that link in at the end of this video. And I can't thank you enough, Brownie, for giving us a few minutes and a few stories about, and I'm going to say it as crisp as the Houston area is right now, a few stories about Hall of Famer, Billy Wagner.
Good job, Robert. Thank you.
he was ahead of his time, really, when you stop to think about it, in throwing pitches 100 miles an hour consistently. Nowadays, a lot of people do. But when he was throwing, I know there was one year where he was credited with 159 pitches of 100 or more miles an hour. And I think it was, I may be wrong on the exact figures, but I think the entire league had 56, the rest of the league. And in the American League, it was even worse. There were only 26 pitches thrown of over 100 miles an hour. This was in 2003, I believe. Now, that's not only interesting for Billy, but it's interesting for what's happened in baseball over the last 20 years, because now everybody throws 100 miles an hour, it seems.
Yeah, and I'm going to do my usual making the case here. I feel like I have to do it every year, but he's had the 6th most career saves all time. Of those 6 guys that he's in the category with, he's got the best opponent batting average, 187. His ERA is 2.31, which is second among those guys, and number 2 in baseball history of pitchers with at least 900 innings. Mariano Rivera is the only one lower than that. And Wagner critics, well, they're going to bring up his 10-plus ERA in the postseason. He faced a grand total of 30 hitters in 16 major league seasons, with his team leading in the postseason. It's a minuscule sample size. It was 11.2 innings of a 16-year, over 900 inning career. And Greg, can we take Ted Williams out of Cooperstown? Can we take Joe Morgan out of Cooperstown because they didn't do it in the postseason? And I'm hoping that they're going to bring this same energy to Clayton Kershaw voting in a few years.
Well, they made a point on the telecast earlier that in the minds of several of the people on the panel, postseason work should be bonus. That should be what helps you get over the top if you're a marginal player, if you were a great postseason guy. But as far as Hall of Fame itself, that really is the whole picture, not just 11 innings in the postseason that weren't very good. I mean, I tend to agree with them 100%. That can be a bonus. In other words, if anybody thinks Altuve is borderline, which of course ridiculous because he will be a high first ballot or second ballot Hall of Famer. But if they did, then you look at what he's done in the postseason, and that would be bonus. That shouldn't be, 3 batting titles and MVP and 300 career batting average. That should be what puts Altuve eventually in the Hall of Fame. All that heroics in the World Series and postseason should be the bonus. Billy didn't have the bonus. Bagwell didn't have the bonus. Biggio didn't have the bonus, but they didn't need it because their careers were good enough. And frankly, so was Billy's.
He's one of the great personalities too. Do you have any favorite Wagner stories from when you covered him?
Probably how quickly he came back from the game in which in Arizona, where he took the line drive off the side of his head. And when it happened, there was great concern. I remember his legs were flopping around. So he had his brain together, but there was real concern. But as it turned out, it actually gave him a concussion, but it was a glancing blow. He turned his head just enough. Actually, it drew blood. It drew a cut just around his ear. He came back. He had to have 2 or 3 weeks off, I think, because he had to go through the concussion protocol and be sure, because he was having problems with it. He was having vision problems and dizziness and all sorts of stuff. What he said after it, I think, is what I remember the most. He said, yeah, it was a scary thing, but that's one thing you can't be afraid of because there's nothing you can do about it. If a hitter hits a ball through the middle that hard and you can't get out of the way, you're going to get hit. And if you are psyched out by it, you'll never be able to pitch right again. And so I just was able to put it in the back of my mind saying the odds on this were 1 in 2 million or 3 million, and it wasn't going to happen again. Never did, and it didn't affect it long term.
His life is a movie. He grows up in poverty in rural Virginia, left a broken home to live with his aunt, uncle, and cousins as a teenager. He's a natural right-handed hitter who are a natural righty, just that, but broke his right arm twice as a kid, learned how to throw with his left. He was behind in school, but administrators had to let him move up to high school with the other kids his age because he threw a fastball so hard they had worried that he'd hurt other kids, the younger ones. And then he goes to Division III Ferrum College to play football, but the football coach tells him, no, you need to stick with baseball. You can't write this, Greg.
No, you can't. And of course, one of the reasons he really did want to play football, but he was extremely small through high school. He was only about 5'5", weighed 130 or so pounds. After his freshman year at Ferrum College, he gained, I think it was 30 pounds and 3 inches. And his fastball also went from the mid 80s to over 90 miles an hour after that first year. So it was proven after that first year that he made the right choice. Later on, he became he's a college Hall of Famer for his career at Ferrum, and he was throwing the ball at 95 by the time he was a sophomore, and everyone in the nation wanted him when he was ready to be drafted, and the Astros were fortunate enough to get him.
You talked about him getting hit in the head. I think of Billy Wagner. When I see him, I think of a guy that was just fearless on the mound, because you said he's 5'5", but he was 5'10" for a pitcher. He's short. He's throwing at 100 miles an hour. It's coming back at him at that same speed a lot of times. And you never saw it with him. You never felt like that guy was scared of anything.
No, and I think the best quote that I heard was from Randy Johnson. You know, Randy's a fireballer, my goodness. And he and Billy were teammates for part of one season, as you recall, in 1998. And Randy has been quoted as saying, "Billy threw way harder than me." And at that point, I think he probably did, because, as I said, he was throwing 100 miles an hour on routine, way more than the other pitchers in baseball were at that time.
You can tell me this better than anybody, but it felt like, just like Biggio and Bagwell, he was a leader in the clubhouse, and he was a guy that everybody seemed to like. I don't think Billy had enemies in the clubhouse either.
The only enemy he may have had was toward the end of his stint with the Astros, when he had made some comments about Drayton McClain not spending money to to build up the team better, and that made him a trade bait. But he wasn't the only one. His contract was nearing the end, and as you remember, that hit a lot of players, Pence and Brookman and Billy. They all left as a result of Drayton's not wanting, honestly, to put too many long-term contracts on a team that he was planning on selling. Easier to sell if the buyer doesn't have to be tied into all of those. And that's exactly what happened. And Billy was one of the victims.
Known as Billy the Kid, he made his major league debut in 1995 and quickly became the new Astros closer. He recorded 30 or more saves in 6 of his 9 seasons with the Astros, recorded 100 or more strikeouts 3 times, and 3 of his 7 All-Star selections were in a Houston uniform. He was the 1999 NL Reliever of the Year and an integral part of 4 NL Central Division titles between 1997 and 2001. Wagner closed out the Astros' historic 6-pitcher no-hitter at New York in 2003, and he recorded 159 pitches at 100 miles per hour or more that season. A fearless competitor, he developed a blistering slider and closed out his time in Houston with 694 strikeouts in 464 games and a franchise record 225 saves. Ladies and gentlemen, Billy Wagner.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.